Hi, I'm Bob Dixon. Welcome to the Eagle Insight Podcast, your go-to source for bold and actionable leadership insights. With more than 30 years as a military officer and a strategist, I know leadership is about real impact. In this series, I sit down with top industry leaders to uncover their challenges and their success secrets. Ready to elevate your leadership? Well, hit subscribe. And if you'd like to be a guest, visit 5eaglesleadership.com/interview. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the Eagle's Ed podcast, where we help leaders in every industry be just a little bit more awesome. And I have a very interesting job as a leadership coach and as a podcast host. And my journey brings me in touch with so many different kinds of leaders in many different industries. And a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to meet a guy named David Lantz. And he has such an interesting background. He was a leader in the Christian Coalition. He's been an advisor, a consultant, and an author, which is one of the main reasons I really wanted to talk to him, because he wrote a book called Think Like Jesus and Lead Like Moses. Now, if you, like me, grew up in a Christian household and you have this base of history of knowledge of the moral bedrock that our country is founded on, you know the story of Moses and you understand the challenges he had. And sometimes he was not always the best leader. And sometimes he's a flawed individual. And the cool part about really thinking about him as a leader is that he's a human, just like you are, just like the leaders who are trying to run organizations today. And we sometimes fall into some of the same challenges that Moses did. And here's a guy, David, that put that together and made it really accessible in a wonderful book called Think Like Jesus, Lead Like Moses. David, thank you so much for being here.
Bob, thank you for having me on your show. It's a delight to be with you.
Man, I really, really enjoyed reading your book. It was just, it was a delight. And so many of the principles that I try to teach leaders in business are those same things that you were talking about. And it's not like you just wrote this a month ago. This has been around for a while. And it just, I think, reaching back to when you wrote this book and then reaching back to when Moses was alive thousands of years ago, that the kind of timelessness of leadership principles should give us some comfort that there are ways through some of our challenges.
Very good. I so much agree with that. You know, we were talking off air beforehand, but I want to share a story that's not in the book. I was a freshman in college, and I was a pledge in a fraternity, and it came time to do the fall dance, and it was traditional that the pledges would go out and steal pumpkins. And I have to be honest, my parents had visited me that day. My dad gave me some money, and I just said, why don't we buy the pumpkins, and here's $15 towards the project. We bought pumpkins, and I had several other of my pledge brothers say thank you for speaking up. And I learned from that generally people will agree with you and want to stand for the right thing, but they're afraid to say anything. And so as the years went by, I began to see the story of Moses, and I taught a Sunday school class in my church about that. And I thought in 1991, I wanted to write a book about it. And then I got this call about being the head of the Christian Coalition in the state of Indiana. I'm into politics and stuff like that, and I promise I won't go into a deep dive. But here's what I discovered. I said, I'm going to put the book idea on hold. And so I became the head of the Christian Coalition. And in the process, I basically went through all of my finances. I didn't get any of the money that they said that I would get. I got audited by the IRS. People in my church, some of them were criticizing me because they thought I was teaching bad things and so forth. And I had political contacts who essentially wanted to use me for their own purposes and then cast me away. And then when I finished being the head of the Christian Coalition, God said, I think you're ready now to write that book. And I know some people out there called the Tea Party that could appreciate and use it. So those are some of the things that came about from it, and love to get into it. A lot of applications in terms of business. That's where I originally thought of going when I originally started writing the book, and then saw a lot of other applications as well.
I think there's some incredible applications. A lot of the principles that you talk about are just so important today. And one of the things that you mentioned up front in there, and it's not listed as a separate principle, but you mentioned early on that there are that people today, and increasingly so in an increased technological environment are looking for a deeper meaning in life, right? Especially as it relates to work. You said that you're seeing it more and more. I see it too, as in Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they enter the workplace. It's not enough just to give them a paycheck and something to do.
Yeah.
That there needs to be a connection to greater meaning. And I think that the quote that you have from John Naisbitt there that talks about people want, the more technology we have, the more people are going to want to surround themselves with people. There's this need for humans and this interpersonal relationship stuff. I think, really prescient that, Naisbitt, 1982, and you talked about Toffler from about the same time period, that we are living in that world where people are searching for greater meaning.
Very much so. One of the things that happened, I sold telecommunication services for a period of my career. I sold both business phone PBX systems, and I sold what are called network services, high-speed internet, web hosting, stuff like that. And I was doing that in the late 90s and early 2000s. The internet basically went public in 1995. So this was early in the technological revolution. And a problem that came up was that trying to sell web hosting, some people that we were talking to had a consultant set up a URL for them. And one of the things you have to do is to port the URL, and there's some paperwork that has to get signed, and the folks just couldn't remember who the heck the person was that set up their webpage for them.
Right.
And so my boss's boss said, well, David, just forge it and it'll be okay. And I couldn't do that. I was reading a book called The Christian Employee. So that particular book was really affecting me. And so I spent some time. There's a who owns it type of website out there. And I researched it and I found the person. I sent him an email. I wasn't sure I was going to get a response. And lo and behold, he responded to me. I got the paperwork signed properly. Everything was done. But I learned from that, there's just a lot of people, they want to make, there's pressure to do sales and stuff like that. And so they may know the right thing to do, but they feel pressured, or their boss is hitting on them to do stuff. And what I learned from that story I just told you about not stealing the pumpkins,
right,
is that if you will speak up, there will be people who will nod their heads and agree with you. And that's how you build a group of people that begin to trust you. And I think that that's really what Moses learned as well.
I think that's such a great example of that kind of lesson. And I think I've sat in throughout my career in the military. I've been in many meetings where you're looking around the room when somebody says something that's not quite right, and you're looking to try to catch eye contact with somebody, anybody who's going to nod or look alarmed or share the same trepidation you have about a decision that's about to be made or a statement that somebody's made.
Yeah.
And you're just looking for an ally in there so that maybe together you're going to bolster enough courage to somebody go, hold on, maybe this isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Maybe forging this document isn't the right thing to do. And it's not about the document so much. To be honest, in your example with the website domain, trying to find a guy who owns the website from whatever previous life that guy had to have that thing.
And I'm convinced he just, he got paid $50 or whatever it was back then, did it, forgot about it, moved on. And
right. And if you had filed that paperwork, there probably would have been no harm, no foul, and nobody would have ever known, except for the people in that room that said, aha, it's okay to make shortcuts when it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And I think in my mind, when I think about big companies that have failed because of ethical reasons, something like Enron, whose corporate values are like trust and teamwork and communication, somebody did something just like that, just for just one document, and they go, hey, wait, that made us a lot of money.
Yeah. Hey,
can you do it again? Can we make more money?
Don't want to do that. There's in terms of the life of Moses, it's like he has two different lives. If you were to go in the book of Acts, it talks about Moses at the age of 40, had the wisdom and knowledge of the Egyptians. He was powerful in word and deed. And then if you know the story, he somehow finds out, how we're not sure exactly, so I'm not sure, that he is a Hebrew himself. And he begins to learn more about his own story. He tries to rescue some Hebrews and they reject him. and things get out of whack. And you can watch various movies. Frankly, the best movie I think that's portrayed this is The Prince of Egypt. It's a cartoon version of Moses,
Yes.
where he all of a sudden learns that everything he knew about himself was a lie. And so he hits this wall and he runs away for 40 years. And when he's 80, that's when God approaches him at the burning bush. And he says, I've never been eloquent in my life. I don't know how to speak in people. Why are you picking me? Just go find somebody else. I'm not worth it. And God says, you're ready. And so the thing I talk about in I have 10 principles, and one of the principles that I have is gaining God courage, not self courage. When I started out as the head of the Christian Coalition, I told you I thought, hey, I'm pretty good. I've got a master's in public affairs. I've been a lobbyist. I spoke with Toastmasters for 15 years, won lots of awards. I can do this in my own strength. And I learned that was not enough. Yeah, I really did. And so God humbled me and taught me some things. And that's when he said, now you're ready to start. And I saw the same thing going on in the life of Moses.
Yeah, I think that we don't all get 40 years to go get ourselves straight. I think, and sometimes the communication to us to tell us that we're ready doesn't come as stark as it does in a burning bush. But I think that the same process still happens. And you talk about that in the book about growing into the leadership role. It's one of the big 3 challenges that you mentioned, that leadership in this highly connected world that we have. First is providing effective leadership. The second is providing moral guidance. But it's that third one, the growing into the leadership role that you're talking about there, that I think is such a touchable, it is an identifiable challenge that many leaders that grow, that they are suffering from, in thinking about how do I become a leader, and more importantly, how do I become a good leader?
Yes. Now, I know that you're a veteran and appreciate your service in the country. I've never did that. My dad was in the Korean War, but I've never had that experience. But I can imagine very easily that from watching enough movies about wars is that if you're an officer, you earn the trust of the men you lead by putting your life on the line. And, there's a saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so one of the things that Moses does is there comes a point, you might remember the golden calf. He comes down from the mountain. He's been talking to God. They're messing around. God says, just get out of my way, Moses. I want to kill them all and start over with you. You can be the new Abraham. And Moses says, I don't think that's a good idea. Here's why, God. And I know the scholars kind of debate, is he really arguing with God? I don't want to get into that. I'm not a biblical scholar. But what I take from that is that Moses is standing up for the people he leads.
Right.
That's what an officer does, a good officer does on the battlefield. And when you do that and you create that esprit de corps out of a sense of conflict and a sense we ought to hang together or we're all going to hang separately sort of thing, and, forming the Constitution and the country, time after time, leaders who understand that's what you do form a group of people. One of the things I do in the book is I have various video clips from movies, and one of them is Spartacus. And and I'm referring to the one with Kirk Douglas, not the new stuff that's
the good one
on HBO and stuff like that. But at the end of the movie, I think even Pepsi took that. When he stands up to say, "I'm Spartacus," and everybody else does too.
Right.
That is an affirming moment for Spartacus to know that he has led his people and that they believe in him. And so that happened to me in becoming the head of the Christian Coalition. There was a point where we had a meeting of people after the 1992 election. Got them all in a room from around the state. I didn't do much of the talking. I had other people do the talking. But one guy named Bill, who I don't think I'd ever met before we had the meeting, he basically stands up at the end. He says, we need to give financially to help David Lantz run this organization, because without him, we separately can't do anything. And that was very humbling for me.
I can feel that moment. It's the I am Spartacus moment, right? That when other people are, look, I believe enough in you that they are willing to make a sacrifice themselves. But you only earn that. That's the trust piece. Mm-hmm. Right. And you talk about that when you talk about making your vision their vision.
Yeah.
Part of that is building that trust so that people can buy into your vision to see that. Um, yeah. So talk about that a little bit. I love the making your vision their vision. I think there's a lot of leaders in business that say, okay, here's my vision. Here's the vision statement. We're going to put it on a t-shirt. Everybody wear this.
Yes.
And
And
that's,
then off to the next thing.
and then we're off. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan. I'm the original Star Trek series. I don't know if you ever noticed, but whenever anybody got injured on the Star Trek ship Enterprise, Captain Kirk could do their job.
Right.
Doesn't mean he did it as good as he didn't do science as well as Spock. He didn't do communications as well as Uhura. He didn't do all the other things as well as others, but he could do it because he understood how everything worked. And so one of the things I think that you build a team, you build buy-in to a vision is that you know how to do all the various things. There's a phrase from the movie Galaxy Quest where the bad guy says, "What captain does not know every bolt and nut in his ship?" And so the same thing when you can help other people and do that job, a leader should be able to do anything he asks somebody else to do. And when they see that, and they see you standing up in a place that they can't go to speak for them, that's when they really have a buy-in. Have you seen the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis as
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah.
At the very beginning of the movie, it is so captivating. There's these two black soldiers, and one of them is pushing on Lincoln for fair pay between black and white officers in the Union Army. And Lincoln's, trying to work around this. And then a couple of white soldiers come up and they were really taken with the story of the Gettysburg Address. They'd just heard it and they start fumbling through trying to repeat parts of it. And then they get called off. They got to go fight whatever they got to do. And so the two white soldiers and the other black soldier walks off. And the one that had been pushing on Lincoln had been silent up until that point, and then he turns and starts to walk away, and he finishes the speech, and talking about how all of us. I had it memorized, and now I can't say it, but it's the end of the Gettysburg Address where we'll have a new birth of freedom and government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. And what I take from that is that this black officer who was pushing on Lincoln still wanted to fight for him because he knew, even though Lincoln couldn't do everything for him, Lincoln was standing in the gap for him, and he was willing to put his life on the line. And I think that that's what good leaders do.
Yeah. I think particularly when there's a moral question. Right. It's one thing to say that in the context of law enforcement or military that the great leader is willing to go over the wall first. But it's another when there's a very difficult moral question, such as the example from Lincoln. I think there's also hey, we don't need to give the guys a raise because our attrition rate is still way within the acceptable boundary. So we're going to go ahead and not give out a raise this year. Mm-hmm. And I own a construction company. I have a roofing company in Atlanta, and the guys who are doing most of the hard work are not in the air conditioned offices, right? And they're certainly not telecommuting from Tampa like I am. They're out there in the hot summer sun putting roofs on. And it's easy to look in the boardroom and to say, it's okay. Our turnover rate is so low that we don't have to pay them anymore, and they'll still keep working hard for us. I go, hold on. Like, there's food on my table because somebody's on a roof in Georgia. Like, maybe we owe them a little bit more. And when the troops hear that you did that, it changes their perspective of what you are as a leader and what leadership is about. Yeah. Now, I would never do that simply for that effect. That would be manipulative. But taking care of the troops is the number one thing that you're taught as a military officer. And it's something that I want to instill in every leader that I work with is just remember the money that comes into this company is because somebody at the bottom of this is turning a wrench, putting on a roof, filling out a form, whatever it is that they do for your company. And you've got to stand up for them.
And one of the books that I read back when I wrote my book was Agenda for a 21st Century by a guy named Rushworth Kidder. Now, I don't remember a lot about the book, but the thing that stood out, and I mentioned in my book, is that of these world leaders that he interviewed, there were a variety of topics, but number 6 of all the topics they discussed was the deterioration in private morality. And so you can see that as our world becomes less connected to moral teachings of whatever faith tradition you care to think about. One of the things that I do is I'm an adjunct instructor and I teach for several schools. I also teach dual credit classes for high schools. So I'm in touch with 17, 18, 19-year-olds. And so oftentimes we do have these moral discussions. And so what you can do is you can pull from the topic of slavery. There was actually a Supreme Court case in the state of South Carolina where a white slave owner shot his black slave girl in the back, killed her. And he was not found guilty of murder because it was his property.
Right.
Now, you've heard the phrase, my body, my choice. That's the same thinking as my property, my choice. And what I tell my students is I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I'm here to make sure that you're not guilty of thoughtless thinking.
Right.
That you need to think through what you're doing and understand that many of the issues that we face today have been faced by humanity throughout its existence. They just, the phrasing is different, but the situations are different, but the basic principles are the same. And so we have to have some sort of moral foundation if we're all going to get along and live together and not kill each other.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Moses is facing that problem with the people that followed him. They weren't all Hebrews. They were people that were sometimes called the rabble because they just happened to come out of Egypt at the same time. And he's got to work through working with them as well, making in the law of God it possible for somebody to become a member of the Jewish community if they did these certain things and so forth. And so how you allow people to join you and to get on your bandwagon and make it a process that is fair and equal across the board, that's another key.
So there's a lot there. I think one of the things that came to mind while you were telling that is particularly the slogans that come out, which most of, and many times, are designed to manipulate people's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And we want people to see things a certain way so that they will then behave in a certain way, because however it is that you view a topic is how you're going to act on it. You talk about praise as a potential for manipulating. And what you say is praise to uplift, not to manipulate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
So working with a non-for-profit organization that didn't have hardly any money, what could I do to encourage people to do the things that I needed to do? And so everybody else is a volunteer. The state of Indiana has 92 counties. So one of the goals of the organization was to create county chapters that could then be effective locally. We managed to have 25 out of our 92 counties have chapters. And so there was a process that I went through. The national organization had a little publication that they sent out called the Christian American, and the states could do their own thing to as an insert. And I found a guy who would do that for me. And so I basically put out the word, I need volunteers to help with this, that, and the other thing. So I had people who came forward. And so one of the things that I would do then is to set up a meeting with them and start a process to see if we could create a county chapter. And sometimes they would say, this just isn't for me, but I know so-and-so will be happy to do that. So sometimes it got passed around. But one of the things I discovered, an easy way to thank people is if they had a passion for something, I could have them write me an article on the topic. So there was a woman named Marcy. She all of a sudden decided she wanted to do homeschooling. Now, this is back in the early 1990s. Homeschooling at that time time was just getting started. It wasn't as big of a deal, especially in the state of Indiana, as it was then. So I encouraged her to write an article. And then all of a sudden, she was getting calls from across the state. How do I do this? How do I do this? She all of a sudden became an expert, and she was very appreciative of that. And so that uplifted her. Other people, there was sometimes a meeting out of state for the national leadership. I couldn't go, so I had somebody else go in my place, and that was the sort of thing that they wanted. So leaders have to be willing to give other people the opportunity to be in the limelight. I know that you talk a lot about the idea of delegating. And so you do that to train them up in what they're doing,
right,
to help you do what you're doing better. Sometimes they will do it better than you could ever possibly do, but certainly they'll be able to reach people that would never give you the time of day. And so you do that. Now, get back to the story of Moses. So as you might recall, about 3,000 people are killed by the Levites after the golden calf. But then, Moses says, God gave me these plans to make the tent of the meeting, the Ark of the Covenant. I don't have any skill in that. Who can do this? And so I can't pronounce their names in the Old Testament, but their letters are B and O. Okay. So B and O are the two guys that are the craftsmen. And in chapter 35 of Exodus and chapter 36, Moses is saying, B and O, there are guys. If they can do it, nobody can. And they come from this tribe and that tribe. And now all of a sudden, think about this. The people that hear this, they're praising B and O, but they're praising the tribes they come from. And so everybody says, wow, hey, we're pretty good stuff. We've been recognized. And so Moses says we need to bring gold and silver to build these various things. And there was more than enough that was brought. And Moses had to tell the people to stop bringing things because the people were so grateful. Mm-hmm. And that's a story that I tell in the book about praising to uplift and not to manipulate. Now, I know that there are churches that use that story about, hey, they gave until they had to be told not to give. But the reason they did that was they were praised and thanked for what they had done. And oftentimes, I don't care whether it's church, business, whatever, we forget to thank the people that helped us.
Yeah, that's a very powerful lesson. I think when leaders use their position to show gratitude, they build trust, they build confidence, they connect the organization in a much more powerful way than simply, hey, you did what you did for your paycheck, and I gave you your paycheck, because that's so transactional, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I work with a nonprofit, and we have a lot of volunteers that help, and we just put on a major event, and it turned out swimmingly, mostly because of all of the volunteers that showed up to help make it a success. And we were talking to one of the senior leaders in the nonprofit, and he says, I'm not sure exactly how we're going to thank them, but boy, do I want to be part of that. Mm-hmm. And yeah. What a great statement. And I was very proud of that leader to say, look, that's exactly right. And we have to show them that we do appreciate what they give, because the word voluntary is in there. They gave of themselves, of their own volition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's what gratefulness, I think, is a leadership trait that we should stamp our foot up and down on. It's like, hey, leader, when you're trying to pick out the skills that you want, gratitude is a skill, and it's a practice, and it's a habit.
Yeah. And
you need to make it so. You said something interesting when you brought up the delegation piece, and I love how you phrase this in the book, is purposefully sharing your authority.
Yeah.
I love that.
So in early on in Moses' career, they happened to be in a place called Midian, which is where his father-in-law Jethro lives. And so Moses is out there, and everybody has their problems, and Moses is judging the people's issues from dawn to dusk. And Jethro comes along, and he says, and this is chapter 18 of Exodus, if anybody ever wants to look it up, and he says, you're going to wear out if you keep this up. What you need to do is you need to find people you trust to judge hundreds, 50s, and 10s, and you give them the knowledge of what they need to do, and then turn them loose and go do it. And in chapter 18, verse 23, Jethro says to Moses, and if you do this and God so wills, then you and all these people will go to your place in peace. Now, I know that leadership books, ever since the printing press was developed, has talked about one of the things of leadership is to do things so that everybody benefits. But there it is in God's words 3,500 years ago. Everybody's going to benefit, will go to their place in peace. But you've got to be willing, Moses, to give up control. You've got to be willing to give up knowing all the gritty details of every person that you can potentially hold over their head. You've got to be willing to let other people do the judging, and they might not do it as well as you, and you've got to allow them to make mistakes. And, you are the appellate judge in this case, and in return, you get a little bit more free time. By the way, I am your father-in-law. I would like grandchildren, and you'll get a better sense of the big picture. So you spend more time on the big picture stuff and whatever that might be. And so those things are things that I talk about in that book and learning how to delegate myself. And a lot of times people just don't want to give up the power and the authority and the limelight.
The stuff that it boggles my mind that people don't want to delegate, because I'm fundamentally a lazy person, and I would much rather have really good people do the stuff than for me to do it. I would much rather have a shorter workday and just things be done right by the right people. I never really, I think, articulated it very well about what you're giving up when you do delegate. And you talked about giving up control and giving up knowledge of details. And in the Moses case, you're talking about specifically knowledge of people and their things. But I know leaders that, like of an engineering firm, for example, that has to know, how many trucks are showing up on this project today. Like, well, dude, you've got 50 projects in this company. Why are you worried about how many trucks are on that one? You've got 8 people between you and that problem.
Yeah.
But you aren't willing to let go of the knowledge of those details because you think you're the only one that can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what a trap.
And here's the dirty little secret. We talked a little bit about the technology stuff. More and more things can be handled technologically. Let me tell you a quick story, and this I hope will scare you for our future. As I mentioned, I teach dual credit courses. There's a community college here in Indiana that I teach for. And so I'm teaching an introductory econ class. And so in this introductory econ class, we're looking at inflation. And so the students are asked to find a product. What did it cost in 2010? What does it cost today? Well, obviously the price has gone up. Now, if mathematically, if you were to calculate a percentage change, the percentage change would be positive. I have students calculating negative percentage change.
Uh-oh.
And so I say, hey, I need you to find the formula to calculate percentage change, write it out step by step. There's a little discussion area where they write it out, and then redo your math for me. And the response I get this week was, well, I put it into the calculator and it still came up negative. And so there is a teacher there at the school that I'm dealing with, and I sent him a thing and I said, this is a systemic problem because I see this every time I teach this course in this thing. So we've got a lot of young people across Indiana and probably across the country that do not know the proper order of putting numbers into a calculator to get the correct answer. Yeah. And so this is a thing where we've lost the ability to do technology. I'm old enough to remember using slide rules back when the brand new calculators cost $200 just to do add, addition, subtraction, and division and multiplication. And so now we've got people that don't even know which order you put the numbers into the online calculator. And so business owners, you need to understand that AI is coming. It will revolutionize everything you thought you understood. I have taught myself HTML so I can write my own web pages. In fact, I changed one subpage on my web page before I got on with you. I've taught myself how to do these various things. I have a course called How to Teach with Technology Online. In 2007, I had a student working with job placement for people. And at that time, that's when Microsoft Office was hitting the workforce. And 50-year-old white guys who were used to giving their handwritten notes to a secretary to type them, now were expected to do it themselves.
Right.
And I asked my student, I said, what is your number one demographic for people coming to you to get help get a job? And she said, white men over 50.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so essentially, white men over 40, you need to think through the or whatever color you are, but you need to think through the technological change that is happening, that generations can't talk to each other because they don't speak the same language. The words mean different things to different age groups. And that's one of the things that I learned in front of a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds. And that's a huge challenge, especially if us old farts don't want to change the way we do things.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think you hit on something that's really important is our reliance on technology. Sometimes we think we're getting the right answer just because the tech came back with the answer. And simply putting something into a calculator and saying, well, it's got to be -5 because that's what the calculator said, without taking a step back and saying, is it possible that that's a negative number?
Yeah.
Like, it couldn't possibly be negative. So if it's coming out negative, it's wrong. And look, computers are going to do exactly what we tell them to.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to give us the returns that we program them to. And if we did it wrong, we should be able to recognize when something is wildly off.
Yeah.
And so there's this, yes, we need to know how to use the tech, but we also need to know when the tech is wrong. What do we do about that? And how do we recognize it?
And the scary part is that young people, they can't get out of their little boxes. Critical thinking, I tell people, is the ability to synergistically take information from different sources, put it together, and have something brand new. I discover, and I've even asked students about this, and they agree with me, that this age group that's coming up find it very difficult. They are used to their education materials laying out everything for them to do, and then give the assignment and be in that little box. And don't you dare move into another box because I don't know what to do. And that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge from educators. That's a challenge to business owners. I work with an organization called Vertical Immersive that have basically focused on entrepreneurship and teaching young people everything in terms, including proper etiquette at a business dinner.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important. What came to my mind as you're talking about that is we've got a young man that's working for one of our companies that very smart academically went to a good business school, has an MBA, not a lot of real work experience because he went from college straight into a graduate program, but now works for an entrepreneurial company. And that is the definition of unstructured space. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, I'm not sure what to do. And there's no instruction list. And, the answer is you've got to not just figure out how to do something, but you got to figure out what to do first.
Yes.
And I'm having a conversation with him the other day, and he said, my entire life has been very well structured. The education system, highly structured. He's very good academically, right? Because he could figure out this is how they want me to learn. I just do it this way, mm-hmm. the way it's designed, and I can get full benefit out of that and get great grades.
Yeah.
But they don't learn okay, when there's no structure, then what? And I think we are giving people access to a ton of information and a lot of how-tos. Like if there's something you don't know how to do on your car or in your house, pull up a YouTube video. There's somebody out there giving that information for free, and you can figure out how to change the belt on your dryer without having to call somebody.
Yeah.
But that highly structured environment works until you're in an unstructured space. And so
and we don't teach young people how to handle that.
We don't. And I think we probably have not been teaching that for quite some time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what needs to change other than when you throw people in there. I think we have to have a bit of understanding.
Let me throw this out. I imagine that you've got a lot of people in your audience who are grandparents or at least soon to be grandparents. I've got a friend. His name is Bob Peterson. He lives in Naples, Florida. He says it's one of the wealthiest areas in the country. And he says a lot of retirees there are what he calls PIPs, previously important people.
Right.
He has a ministry called Legacy Imperative, where he works with grandparents to connect with their grandchildren, and so he and I hit it off. I write a newsletter called Conversations with the Culture. I use movies to illustrate precepts from the Bible, and then talk about life. And that's why I discovered my millennial children. We could connect. It's like that scene from the movie, What You Would,
Yeah.
and go from there. And so, I'm not sure where we are on the time, but I just want to encourage people to think about a legacy. There's a guy named Bob Buford who wrote a book called Halftime: From Success to Significance, where
Nice.
you
Yeah.
hit the halfway point in your career and you need to begin to think about legacy. Maybe it's turning over your business. My dad was an optometrist, and he found the right people to turn over his business, invested time in them, and so everything went very well. That optometric practice is still going. He passed away in 1997. There are other people that don't think about it, don't want to share anything with their family members or key workers in their businesses. That's a huge mistake. But the thing that we tend to miss is that our families need our investment in them.
Right.
And the things that I'm sharing with you, you can't expect a teacher who doesn't have a relationship with your child or your grandchild to solve the problem. We
Right.
got to roll up our grandparents' sleeves and get in the game. Psalm 18:34 says, "He trains my hands for battle so that my arms may bend a bow of bronze." And it's not just fighting people in a physical battle, but it is a moral, cultural sort of thing that we've got to jump into and figure out how we lead before this country falls apart. By the way, that's sort of the title of one of my other books, The Unraveling of We the People.
Oh,
By the way,
wow.
here's this one, Think Like Jesus, Lead Like Moses. Former Vice President Mike Pence has a review on the back of it.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I tell you, readers, listeners out there who read, and I encourage you all to read. You've heard me talk about that quite a bit. Great leaders are often great readers. This is a book worth your time. And there is just one other area in there. You kind of wrap the whole thing up when you talk about creating noble plans.
Yeah.
And it's about getting to the other side of the hill. Talk to us about that.
So there was this TV show back in the 1960s when I was maybe 7, 8, or 9. I don't remember. And it was like an offshoot of Gilligan's Island, if your listeners have ever seen that. So these two guys are in a spaceship, and they end up in 1,000,000 BC, and they're trying to fix their spaceship so they can get back to their own time. And so the cave people say, "Where do you come from?" And they say, "Well, we come from the other side of the hill." And so they're always, "How do we get to the other side of the hill? We want to go there." And this sounds great. So having a vision for the other side of the hill that nobody's ever been to, and maybe you haven't been there either, but that's the first step. And then just like those astronauts, they got to describe everything to the cave people. Here's what we're doing. Here's why what you're doing really matters. So that's the third thing. It's not just, "Here's what I need you to do." It's, why does this matter? We got to do these various things. And the fourth thing is to then create a vehicle that everybody can climb aboard. Now, maybe that's a business that you as an entrepreneur are launching. Maybe it's a political campaign. I'm working with a company called The Thinking Tree. They publish for the homeschool audience, and they asked me to write a book, which hopefully will be out by May. It's called Run, Fight, Lead, a student guide to becoming a successful political leader. And so thinking about how you get young people, like I was mentioning a moment ago, teaching them stories of Abraham Lincoln and Davy Crockett. He was a member of Congress, by the way, for those of you who don't know, how to get involved as a volunteer in campaigns, how to improve your public speaking skills, all sorts of things. How do you do that sort of thing, but to get into a vehicle that can then help us go as a community to the other side of the hill? What's the vision? The other side of the hill. Here's what you need to do as part of the group doing this. Here's why what you do really matters. And here's the vehicle that we're going to climb aboard and go together to the other side of the hill.
So I love that the first part of it of having a vision is so critical. There are many leaders who just want to be in charge. I'm like, okay, where are you leading your people to?
Hmm.
Oh, well, it's much easier to get people moving with you if you know where you're going.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about leaders who like when I asked them, oh my gosh, I had a leader that I was working with, and I said, well, how are things going? And he said, we're getting there. I'm like, okay, great. Where's there?
Yeah. Define it.
And there wasn't a clear answer of where there was. And he said, yeah, it's we all know. Like, okay, then let's all get a little good a dry erase marker out. We'll go right down where there is. Uh, I guess that question haunted him. He's a great leader, and it's a great organization. They have now defined where there is, and
Hmm.
they got to their first there, and they had to come up with another one because they got to the other side of the
Sure.
first hill, and then they had to create a bigger hill for themselves to get over.
Yep.
But that is, I think, one of the leader's first duties
Hmm.
is to create that vision for where, and it doesn't matter if you're the top of the organization, if you're the CEO, absolutely you have to have a vision, but you could be tucked away in a middle part of that as a leader, as a junior leader. But where are you taking the piece that you own?
Yeah. And the problem that so often happens is you create your vision and then you put it on the shelf and you never talk about it.
Oh, that
And
pains me.
I'm an elder in my church, and I'm trying to have a polite conversation that maybe the staff, when they get together with their staff meetings, maybe not every week, but maybe once a month, say, here's our goals that we agreed on as a church, and how are we doing in whatever the ministry might be, and how do we know if we're making progress? What are our metrics? And some people in not-for-profit say, well, I don't want to be measured. You can't measure that. Well, yes, actually you can. You just have to think outside of dollars and cents. You have to think of other things that indicate if you're doing a good job or not. And one of the other things that I learned a long time ago, it really doesn't matter what plan you have. It matters if you follow the plan.
Yeah, and then that is a sound military principle as well. That a pretty good plan executed excellently will be better off than having an excellent plan that's poorly executed.
Right.
Get the 80% plan out there and just go do it,
Hmm.
because no plan is going to survive first contact, and you're going to make adjustments to it as you go. But if everybody's on the same sheet of music, boy, you're going to be so much better off.
Do we have time for one more story?
We do. One more story.
Okay, so turning over leadership, Moses picks Joshua. It says in the Bible that Joshua would go into the tent and listen to Moses and would not want to leave. So I think about that. In my life, I volunteered with something called the Hugh O'Brien Youth Foundation. Do you remember Hugh O'Brien, the actor?
No, where do I
Okay.
know him from?
He was the star of not Gunsmoke. It was Wyatt Earp back in the 60s.
Okay,
You look like you're a little younger than me, so you may not have watched that.
I might have missed that one. Yeah.
Right. So, at any rate, so in the early 60s, late 50s, he would admit, I'm not sure if he's still alive, but I've heard him say, I was a hard drinking, womanizing guy, and I got to a point in my career, what's left for me to do? And somebody said, you should go visit Albert Schweitzer in Africa. So he did.
Wow.
And so Albert Schweitzer was spending dawn till dusk caring for people in whatever place in Africa. I've forgotten where he was. And Hugh would say, I need to let you get your rest, Dr. Schweitzer. And he said, no, you've got to stay in the tent. There have only been 3 people who have come to visit me. You are the only person from America. I need to talk to you. And so for 9 days, Albert Schweitzer poured his life into Hugh O'Brien. And Hugh came to one of the sessions I was doing here in Indiana. I have no recollection of what I said, but I remember virtually everything he said. And so he comes back and he starts up the Hugh O'Brien Youth Foundation, high school sophomores, to learn about the free enterprise system and how to be an entrepreneur. And so my job was to get speakers to come and speak on those various things. Well, he had his national group go to Chicago, Illinois in 1968. At the same time, the Democrat national convention was being held. That's the one that broke into race riots. And
Right.
at 2 a.m, somebody comes to Hugh and he says, "We've got to get out of here. The Black Panthers are in the foyer. Eldridge Cleaver and the Black Panthers." And he says, "Oh, good. Let's go have a rap session with them." So he takes all of his students, goes down to meet with Eldridge Cleaver, and they talk politics and morality until, a normal time to get out of bed. And so listening to him and taking that knowledge from Albert Schweitzer that so impacted his life and impacted thousands of people across this country. The Hugh O'Brien Youth Foundation still goes on to this day with high school sophomores who are chosen by their peers to go to a weekend retreat in their state capital, and then a boy and a girl from each state goes to the national convention every year. And that's one of the way we train the leaders of America for America's future.
Wow. What a powerful story. And I think there's something really special about being with people like Schweitzer that you can't help but be changed by interaction with them.
Yeah.
And there's this myth that you have to be a charismatic leader to be effective. There's a myth that you have to be a born leader. The fact of the matter is there are many people who have changed the world without those characteristics and without being a born leader. And, Moses wasn't, he was 80 when he finally took the reins.
That started.
And there are many people like Schweitzer and Mother Teresa and Gandhi, I think, is a great example of somebody who wasn't necessarily charismatic, but was incredibly influential and changed people's lives. Leaders come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and leadership has some fundamental principles. Thank you for sharing your view of the fundamental principles that we learned from Moses and from your experience in life, which has been vast and interesting. And I believe that is the first time on my podcast that anybody has mentioned Galaxy Quest, which is one of the best movies that Alan Rickman ever did. And kudos for that. You already went up 3 notches in my book today, David. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your time and your story and your great book. Listeners, if you haven't picked up Think Like Jesus, Lead Like Moses, you can't have my copy because it's all marked up right now with my notes from this.
Very good. Well, you can learn more about me at wisejargon.com, wisejargon.com.
Awesome.
Thanks for taking the time to visit with me.
David, this has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.